All right, so Bergen left us the handout that kind of gives us a potential direction to go in terms of how we present things to the class. But I thought what we might do tonight, we got a couple of chapters. Let's just read it together, and we'll read a little bit of a section at a time, and then open it up to discussion about what we've read, and we ought to be able to get through both chapters tonight, I hope. We'll get there one way or another. So I'll start reading in Joshua chapter 1 and go through verse 9, and then we'll talk a little bit. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness of this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, to the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." So what stands out to you about this?
I'll take the low-hanging fruit. Be strong and courageous.
Yeah, so God mentions it, 3 times here in these verses? And if we think back about it, we know, we look in Deuteronomy chapter 31. I don't think we actually read this last week. I might have made reference to it. But in Deuteronomy chapter 31, when we're finding out that Joshua is going to succeed Moses, Moses continued to speak all these words to Israel, and he said to them, and you keep going down and get to verse 6, "Be strong and courageous." Verse 7, "Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him, the son of Israel, be strong and courageous." Verse 9, "Then Moses wrote this law and gave it to the priests." Looked at the wrong part of my notes. Sorry. Anyway, several times we've already seen that in Deuteronomy when Moses was talking to Joshua, giving him the charge, talking to the people, giving them their charge. Now God says the same thing as he is speaking to Joshua. What do you make of repetition like that when you run across it?
3 times is usually significant. A 3-line whip.
You know, when I tell my kids are older now, and so we don't do as much of this, but you know, when you repeat yourself to your kids, sometimes it's because they're not doing it after the first time you said it, right? So you're reinforcing and trying to get them to change their behavior. So there can be emphasis that is, okay, I want you to listen up, pay attention. Or there can be a corrective aspect to it. And so, you know, for me, it perks my ears up. You know, it makes me think, okay, why? Why is he saying this 3 times? I'm gonna file that away, and I'm gonna keep reading, and we're gonna find out how effective that admonition or that exhortation was. What else stands out?
How they're supposed to clean the land.
Okay, so several times.
Every place they put their foot. And then he outlines the perimeters.
Uh-huh.
A little research I did said that's 300,000 square miles.
Yeah.
Same research said that they only ever took 30,000 square miles of the land that was promised.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really realize until you get a map and you look at
Yeah.
what it's talking about. I mean, that includes Iraq,
Like goes all the way down into
Syria, all that.
almost all the way back to Egypt on the
Yeah.
southwestern side. So we give you all this land, and that's the other aspect of it.
But they had to
Who-
put their foot on it.
Yeah.
It wasn't given to them if they didn't do that.
And you use the phrase right there, given to them. What's the significance of that? Right?
It's
I
a
mean,
gift. It's not a
Mul-
boundary.
multiple times, and especially when we can go look at umpteen zillion times in Deuteronomy where it's talked about the land that the Lord your God is giving to you. When he's talking to both Moses and Joshua at various points in Deuteronomy, the Lord your God is fighting for you as you're taking this land. And so I hear in this echoes of what if we were reading through this and if we had Deuteronomy well in our heads thinking about it, we're hearing the same kinds of things again. God is stressing, the Lord is stressing to Joshua some of the same things that we've been hearing from Moses, especially in Deuteronomy. We could go back even further, think about verse 5. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. It's interesting, he actually pulls Moses into that, but we can go back and look in Exodus when God called Moses. What did God say to Moses? You can look in Exodus 3:12. For one. He said, Moses said to God, verse 11, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, but I will be with you. And he says it again in some form or fashion in chapter 4, verse 15. Moses is given all these signs, and Moses is in the midst of making his excuses and so forth. And eventually Moses breaks down, verse 13, but he said, oh my Lord, please send someone else. Right? I've been making all these other excuses. Okay, I'm just going to lay it on the line here. Just send somebody else. Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. I will be with you. Just as he told Moses, and he reminds Joshua here, just as I was with Moses, and I had to tell him about it too, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. That same phrase, actually, I will not leave you and forsake you, is also from Deuteronomy 31. So there's so much here. We could actually spend a lot more time going back and finding all the individual places in Deuteronomy. There's just a ton of it.
It's pretty similar to what Jesus said in Matthew 28:20.
Uh-huh. Hold on with you always, to the end of the age.
Was it I wrote that book, Go Ye means Go Thee.
Somebody else want to read the rest of the chapter 1, and we'll we'll keep moving.
So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your supplies ready. 3 days from now you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. But to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the command that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you. The Lord your God is giving you rest as he has granted you this land. Your wives, your children, your livestock may stay in the land that Moses gave you east of the Jordan, but all your fighting men, fully armed, must cross over ahead of your brothers. You are to help your brothers until the Lord gives them rest, as he has done for you, and until they too have taken possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. After that, you may go back and occupy your own land, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you east of the Jordan toward the sunrise. Then they answered Joshua, whatever you have commanded us, we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, so we will fully obey you. Only may the Lord, your God, be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your word and does not obey your words, whatever you may command them, will be put to death. Only be strong and courageous.
All right, so one of the things that jumps off us is at me right there at the end is they echo back the same words that God had told Joshua. Now he's getting encouragement from the people. What else do you pick up on in this section?
The 3 tribes staying east of the Jordan won't possess it until the fighting men come home having done their duty.
So we can go back and look at Numbers 32 and find out what was going on there, but Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh staked out their claim.
That begs a question though, doesn't it? If all the fighting men are over in west of the Jordan, who's looking after the kids and the mums and the old folk?
So if you go back in Numbers 32, one of the things that is written there is they say, we've taken these fortified cities from the people who were here, and we're going to leave our families inside those fortified cities.
Okay.
Now, what does that mean? Kids are going to be pouring oil from the top of the walls of these fortified cities?
I think the fighting men probably had some sort of an age
So they're
bracket
maybe
they were
they're
in, so you may have left older people behind.
Older behind. Very good knowledge. But yeah, it actually talks about them taking those cities and putting their families inside them, building pens for their livestock. And
Okay.
so,
It is interesting because those half-tribe, the half-tribe and the 2 tribes that stay was not the intention.
no, it
It was a
wasn't.
concession.
It's a concession.
And
In fact, I mean, if you read in 32, God's a little bit upset about it at first.
very angry. Yeah.
And Moses chastises them, and they said, look, we're going to come fight. And now, is that a response to the anger, or was it, we have a misunderstanding? This was always our intention, was to come help you fight. I don't know, I haven't read it closely enough to know the answer to that question.
But I thought the possession was on the west side of the Jordan anyway, and they were like, hey, we've taken over this land, this is kind of nice, we should stay here.
Yeah, but the Euphrates is well east of that.
Yeah.
I kind of think more it's to do with
They got so
you're choosing what land you want. That's not your responsibility. I'm the one who is supposed to, the Spirit's going to give the land to whom He wills. So they've kind of jumped that gun a bit there.
He's also going to make sure they're not going to back out, because he says they're going to go in front of your brothers.
Yeah, the battering ram.
It is fun too. That it says, just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you.
That shit's scary spitless, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, how did you do on that?
Tell me how you passed
What's the
that
pass
test.
mark?
No, maybe it's the ones that are alive pass the test. I don't know. I mean, that's those are the ones that obey.
But all these guys were under 20. when
Yeah,
they
they only survived because they were too young. That was their only
So maybe they did obey
redeeming
Moses. Huh?
It's still, I still believe it's foreshadowing. I mean, I think it's true, and I think it's related to us for a reason, right? Because we have, in this first chapter, we have some positive things, some encouragement, some exhortation, but there are other little bits and pieces that, especially as we read further, we're going to look back on and say, okay, that was actually a little bit of a warning. Like, God knew what was going to happen, and he tried to nip it in the bud when he's talking to Joshua at first and reinforcing some things. And now we see it coming to fruition later in the story.
Kind of like Deuteronomy 17 foreshadows Samuel, king.
Right.
Wanting the king.
All right, so we've got one more repetition of strong and courageous. We have the scary, ironic statement, just as we obeyed Moses in all things, we're going to obey you. One thing we haven't really talked about yet, we did mention briefly last week, but there's several mentions of rest in here. And some of us that, I know when Mike was doing the Hebrews class several years ago now, we remember rest and them looking back at this time and talking about how they were coming into the land to have rest, and how the Hebrews writer picked up on that theme. But you can see this place of rest multiple times in this particular part of the scripture. All right, so we're ready. We kind of have everything, the stage is set now, right? God has addressed Joshua. Joshua has addressed the officers of the people. We've picked up on the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and we see that what they said they were going to do in Numbers 32, they claim they're going to do here in Joshua 1, and they're getting ready. So let's go on with chapter 2, and I don't know, maybe somebody just read as far as you want to go. We might as well just do the whole chapter, but if you don't want to read the whole chapter, give it up somewhere and we'll move on. Somebody else.
Then Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men as spies secretly from Shittim, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." So they went, came into the house of a harlot whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. It was told the king of Jericho, saying, "Behold, men from sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." The king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. And she said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. It came about when it was time to shut the gate at dark, and the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them in the stalks of flax which she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued them on the road to the Jordan, to the fords, and as soon as they were out pursuing them and had gone out, they shut the gate. Now before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and said to them, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land have melted away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. When we heard it, our hearts melted, and no courage remained in any man any longer because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven, above and on the earth beneath. Now therefore, please swear to me by the Lord, since I have dealt kindly with you, that you also will deal kindly with my father's household, and give me a pledge of truth, and spare my fathers and my father and my mother and my brothers and my sisters, with all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." So the men said to her, "Our life for yours, if you do not come to tell this business of ours, and it shall come about when the Lord gives us the land, that we will deal kindly and faithfully with you."
So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. Now she said to them, "Go to the hills, so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." The men said to her, "This oath you made or you made us swear, will not be binding on us unless, when we enter the land, you have tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you have brought your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family into your house. If anyone goes outside your house into the street, his blood will be on his own head. We will not be responsible. As for anyone who is in the house with you, his blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on him. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear. Agreed, she replied. Let it be as you say. So she sent them away, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days, until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the 2 men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, the Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us.
All right. What stands out?
The faith of Rahab.
Is it Rahab or Rahab?
It's Rahab.
It depends on which translation you use, apparently.
If you're looking at these notes.
Rahab, as it's used of cosmic monsters like Leviathan, has a very unpleasant meaning. Useless one or something like that.
So, verse 11, for the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. So she makes that confession, if you will. She has that identification. She knows, in other words, who God is. Which is interesting, right? How does she know who God is?
The whole city has been talking about it for 40 years.
They've been hearing the stories
Red Sea, yeah.
of this group of people wandering around out there in the desert.
And then all of a sudden they're beating King of Og and Sihon and making their way through.
And one of the things that this reminds me of, again, you know, I keep looking back in the story to see where there might be parallels. And you remember when Moses first goes to Pharaoh in Exodus chapter 5, afterward Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness. But Pharaoh said, who's the Lord, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go. And so, I'm not saying there's an intentional connection here, but it reminds me, she witnesses, or she didn't even witness, right? She hears the stories. She hears from other people who might have witnessed or have heard. And she believes, and she knows who God is. Pharaoh's about to know who God is.
He gets a 10-lesson correspondence course.
Yeah.
I think it goes further than that, because polytheists typically see certain gods as being always in the heavens and kind of not overly interested in what goes on earth.
They have their domains. They have their
Yeah.
specific domains.
Whereas this God, I mean, she says he's not just God in heaven, he's also acting on earth. He's God amongst us. So that's a big shift in terms of moving from that polytheistic hermeneutic to a monotheistic. Like, who else could there be? Who else do you need? He's supreme. And like you said, they didn't just beat Og and what was his name, the other one?
Sihon and Og.
Sihon and Og. I mean, they utterly just destroyed them. So, you know, this wasn't just a victory, this was otherworldly.
I mean, those were established nations, and here's this group of people wandering around the desert who whip them.
Yeah.
They don't even have a base of operations. They don't have their own land and resources and so forth, and they still
How do they live
win
in
the
the
battle.
desert? I mean, these people send spies. You just know that some of the what do you call it? The ones that tagged along for a while. You know that they send messages back saying this ain't just a band of people. This is a nation. And somehow they can live in that desert that none of the traders that we deal with, they can't live there. They can pass through it. They know how to do that, but live there? You know, I think sometimes we don't delve deep enough into just exactly what was going on there. But like you say, they're definitely were getting word. This wasn't going on in a cupboard somewhere. I mean, this was known about.
Kind of reminds me of when COVID hit. Before it was coming, we heard it was coming, and everybody was like, whatever.
Yeah.
We're not going to quit working. We're not going to shut down schools. I'm not going to wear a mask. And it's kind of like Jericho. They're like, there's something coming. I don't know. What do you think about that, Roger? I don't know. Well, Rahab's taking it seriously. Because then all of a sudden what happened? It hit. And it's like, oh, we are shutting down. And that's what they're going through. But she's willing to believe the stories and put out an olive branch of hope of faith.
So isn't it?
For it.
There's a lot of complexity in all of this. Let me explain what I'm talking about. You're nodding your head. I think you know kind of where I'm going with this. Rahab is a prostitute. Okay, so there's that aspect of things. Rahab expresses faith that would make some of the Israelites jealous. Right? She lies to get into Hebrews 11, as a friend of mine says, right? I mean, she tells the people who come from her city's king a lie to protect the people.
Ethics.
And she's the beneficiary of an unauthorized covenant. I mean, we looked at it last week. There were several things that God expressly forbade them to do. Right? Don't make a covenant with them. Don't intermarry with them. And the third one kind of rides along with those sorts of things. Because if you let them stay, you're going to be corrupted by them, and you're going to start going after their gods. And in fact, the term that will be used a lot more in the Old Testament for that is whoring after other gods. And so here they make a covenant with an actual prostitute. And God honors it. And oh, by the way, like we talked about last week, take a look at her lineage. Take a look where that goes. There's this guy named Jesus who comes out of that.
You talk about honoring covenants that aren't supposed to be made. You got the whole Gibeonite thing, and then later with Saul, King Saul.
Yeah. And so, this is episode 1 in Joshua of the unauthorized covenant. We get to the Gibeonites, what is that, like chapter 9? Somewhere in there.
I think so.
7 or 9. Anyway.
7's Achan, 8's I.
Okay, that's what I was
I gets destroyed in 8.
There we go. Okay. Yeah. So that's why I say it's complex, right? I mean, we almost okay.
I think the term you're looking for is
it's
Irony?
It is ironic for sure, right? But I mean, so often when and this goes back to kind of our simplistic presentation of Old Testament characters when we're talking about them sometimes. You know, David's good, Saul's bad. Well, no, David's pretty bad too.
Mm-hmm.
He's just got a different heart, you know. And so there's anytime we start trying to talk about people in terms of black and white, we're probably off the mark. And more to the point, you know, thinking about people with regard to Old Testament stories, I'm convinced that should at least be subordinated to what we learn about God in Old Testament stories. God is the main character of Old Testament stories, and I believe that, you know, for the most part, what we should be focusing on when we think about Old Testament stories is, what do we learn about God? What do we learn about his nature? What do we learn about how he deals with his people? What do we learn from his people, good and bad, about how they related to the God who reached out to make them his own? And so the story of Rahab is just one of those that we find in the Old Testament where, well, they shouldn't have done it, but God honored it anyway, and she's got kind of questionable character, but she expresses this strong belief in who God is and gets it right when a lot of people, even among the Israelites, don't get that yet.
And I think that is one of the key aspects of the whole thing, because there is a strong presence of that throughout the Bible, of people that shouldn't get it right, get it right. People that people that should get it right, don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I was flipping through, I was trying to find it because I couldn't remember where it was, but the story of the Naaman becomes leprous.
Yeah, 2 Kings 5.
Yeah. You get down to the end of it, he goes and washes, he's angry, his servant's talking him into it, he gets angry and he does it, and then he returns to Elisha and he says, behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel.
Yeah.
He gets it right, and Elisha's servant's going to get it wrong.
And the king of Israel got it wrong, right? I mean,
Jonah's another good example. Jonah gets it wrong, the people on the boat get it right, and the people of Nineveh get it right. Like, there's so much of this, and then on the cross, you go all the way fast forward to Jesus, right? As Mike would say, we get to Jesus, and the centurion gets it right.
The thief on the cross gets it right.
The thief on the cross gets it right.
I mean, all during Jesus' ministry, we have different examples of that too. He's off in the Gentile areas outside of Palestine proper, and you know, I haven't seen such faith even in Israel.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether she'd have Boaz while she was still living in Jericho, but he turned out to be a pretty decent chap, didn't he?
Yeah.
Followed all the rules, even
He did.
difficult stuff like kinsman and redeemer, which
He was an upright man,
still we can talk
faithful,
about.
obedient. Okay. What else? Anything else jump out at you here?
Well, her story, obviously. They're terrified of these people and have been terrified of them for 40 years. When the first group of spies went in, they come back out and 10 of them said, oh no way, we can't take them. So they'd been spent 40 years wandering around out there. These people were terrified of them the whole time.
I want to take a closer look at this because I've seen some people writing about how, one of the words that we see in Joshua 2 to characterize how the people are experiencing their knowledge of what God is doing through the Israelites you saw it several times in there. They're melting with fear. It's interesting. What would be interesting to me is to go back and look in Numbers 13 to 14 when the spies came back. I'm not sure if the same exact underlying words are used, but what is the response of the people?
It says that they were shaking
Yeah,
in fear.
it's shaking in fear. They're distraught.
I didn't look at what the words were.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
And I'd have to go look at it too. Congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. They grumbled again. That's their standard response.
We don't do that.
But oh, wait a second. Let me look one more place. Oh, I'm not sure if the same word is used. It's certainly the same kind of response, where they hear the story and they want no part of what they're being told. They don't want to experience that. Our hearts melted. There is no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath.
I'm trying to think of that phrase, something about knees and they just become weak in the knees. And
Yeah, weak in the knees.
I think the Hebrew writer, doesn't he, exhort everyone in chapter 12.
Uh-huh.
So fix what's dislocated or whatever and strengthen your gait.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't know the history here necessarily. What is the relationship between, Rahab says, one, obviously it says she came into the house of a harlot named Rahab, but then she's like, my father's household, my brothers, my sisters, my parents. I mean, sometimes, I don't know, that relationship gets strained in with certain professions. I would imagine that would be one of them, but that could be a Western ideal.
Yeah.
We have a different sexual ethic because of Christianity. I don't think that's an honorable. Was that an honorable thing in
What, the profession?
her profession?
Sometimes it was associated with a religious cult.
Yeah,
It could be somewhat more
Esteemed.
esteemed, but
It kind of makes me think of Tamar and Judah.
yeah.
She got him because she pretended to be a prostitute at the crossroads or
Right.
whatever. So it was a kind of a travelling
Service.
like Corinth provided
Yeah.
for people who've been on long journeys and by ship.
That's an interesting question. I don't.
It doesn't seem that she's estranged from her family, I guess.
No, it's not as scorned. It wasn't as scorned upon. It's not as
Yeah.
scorned upon certainly in the Roman world.
Yeah.
The bordellos and everything. It's not as scorned as it would be in a Christian society today.
Is anybody at least interested in the aspect of the story whereby the spies from Israel end up at a prostitute's place?
Yeah.
Heard lots of theories, but
Probably,
You know,
the
probably
least
it's a good place to-
conspicuous place to hide.
It's probably a decent place to stay out of sight of a lot of folks. That they might not want to be seen.
get good information.
Might be a good place to get information.
You're not gonna be turned away, I mean,
Money talk.
Money talks. But it is interesting
Put a
that
scarlet ribbon in the window, not a red light, notice.
Is that where
I don't
Red Light
know.
District comes from?
Yeah.
I don't know what source or anything that the footnote in this Bible has related to Rahab, but there is a footnote to a prostitute. It says, or possibly an innkeeper. However, in the New Testament, she's referred to as a harlot or a prostitute. So, at least by New Testament times, then.
Well, if you look even in the rest of the account here, beyond the first introduction, when she is named, she's not just named Rahab. Rahab the prostitute.
Yeah.
3 different times through the rest of the chapter that I counted.
And notice, the inns and saloons of the Wild West, they weren't just inns, were they?
Yeah. So, kind of shifting over to Bergen's notes here, and maybe thinking about the angle, if you will, the emphasis that he's suggesting has to do with this idea about knowing God. What does it mean to know God? And it builds off that statement of Rahab's that does stand out to us. It's jarring, isn't it, to hear somebody outside the nation of Israel make a profession like that. So, do you know God?
Sounds like they converted the spies as well.
Is there any relation to the Exodus in this case? Bring everybody in, something over the door, that kind of a picture.
Do you think that was the only part of the wall that didn't fall down?
Yeah, I mean that is an interesting idea. I've not taken a look at that myself.
I was trying to look. If
But there is something of a catches your eye, didn't it?
There's no coincidences in the Bible.
Well, and that's why Old Testament narratives are they're really concise when you consider all that could be there. And so they move from scene to scene. Lots of time, we can cover a lot of time in narrative, but then when you have people interacting with each other, it basically slows down to real time.
But there's a synoptic aspect to them as well. You've got the original account, then in a lot of cases you've got the certain psalms that are historical, that give a different perspective, and then you've got the New Testament application, which is another perspective. Yeah. So they're really very interesting.
Yeah. So from our point of view, one of the things that I believe we ought to be trying to do is, okay, what was the intent of the original writer for their intended audience? For example, we see this, I mentioned it last week, we have this with 4 different gospel accounts. They each have different emphases to tell the same basic story. We see a lot of repetition of ideas, or of stories, in Samuel, Chronicles, and Kings in various ways. But it's very apparent that they're written for a purpose. Right? Kings has really a different effect on you as you read it than Chronicles, for example. Kings seems to be trying to explain why all this happened to us, and Chronicles has a slightly different take on that, where we have a lot of the same stories, but it's kind of interesting that some stories don't show up in both places, and so we know that it's not intended to be a complete, exhaustive history the way we think of a history book. It was a selective retelling for a purpose, very much like what John writes in John 20 about there are a lot of other things I could have included here. It's Bruce's paraphrase. There are a lot of other things I could have included here, but these I have written
So that you know
so that
why
you
you're
may-
sitting in captivity.
so that you may know, that you may believe. Right? So, if we believe God inspired these works, then I think one of the things that follows is we have to believe that He inspired them to be the way they are as books, and so we look at them as presented to us to try to understand what He is trying to communicate to people who are looking to this to learn more about who He is. And so we see that these are, I believe, selective retellings of stories. And by selective, I mean intentionally chosen, intentionally presented, which gets to the idea that Bruce was saying previously. There aren't any accidents, or there aren't any, what was the word you used? There aren't any coincidences in the Bible. I think it's significant that in every case where Rahab is mentioned by name throughout chapter 2, it's not just Rahab, it's Rahab the prostitute. That took extra ink, that took a little bit more space on the papyrus, that was in limited supply. It's there for a reason. Now, I don't necessarily purport to know exactly what that reason is, but it's the question that it raises in my mind that makes me want to go look and spend more time figuring things out, digging deeper. And those are the threads that you kind of want to tug at as you're looking at these stories.
I think maybe an element of Deuteronomy 9 rings through Joshua as well.
Oh, yeah.
Don't think it's because of your righteousness that I'm giving you this land.
Yeah.
You're just not as evil as the rest of those people.
Yeah.
Yet.
And we read a little
But
bit
your
of that.
time is coming.
We read a little bit of that last week as part of kind of our
Right.
preview, where all of that lies in the background for sure. And
I think it's probably one for all of us to take heed as well.
so yeah, it's when we're reading Joshua, there's all kinds of things we could look back at, but the one thing we really sure ought to look at is Deuteronomy, where a lot of the Moses is sharing his experience with the people. He's warning them, he's exhorting them, he's encouraging them.
Is he encouraging them when he says,
Threatening them.
I know as soon as I die for sure that you stiff-necked
hypocrite.
you're going to go and rebel. Is that the epitaph of these?
Whatever it takes, right? To try to get the point across. For the ones who need encouragement, there's encouragement. For the ones who need a kick in the pants, there's a kick in the pants.
Yeah. I know someone who preached his last sermon at a congregation he worked with. He chose Deuteronomy. that he said 33.
Ouch. Did he already have another job?
That was his U-Haul sermon.
He was already packed, I assume.
Wow. Well, I don't have anything else to add myself. What do y'all think? Or is there another angle that stands out to you that you're considering taking?
I'm going to start with Luke 24, verse 27. And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all scriptures concerning himself. And we're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to be part of my class.
Do you find the tie? I don't know.
Did you find the
just
transcript?
the Exodus tie is running around in my head, and it's interesting because out of those households comes Israel, God's people. Out of Rahab's house comes Jesus
And
David. Out of the destruction of Jericho, they plunder out of the death of the firstborn in the last plague, they plunder Egypt. Out of the destruction of Jericho, what's the oath that they take to anybody that rebuilds Jericho? Death of the firstborn.
And lastborn.
And the lastborn if you hang the gates.
And who was the king who
And
fulfilled
they did.
that?
And then it happened. But the interesting thing is, what was the death of the firstborn was what was the last plague. I don't know. I mean, there's no coincidences in the Bible. I think it's interesting. I don't know if I'll go there necessarily, but it's fun to.
It's fun to think about the connections. It wasn't a king,
No.
but it happened in the time of Ahab.
Right.
That's kind of the prelude into Ahab and Elijah in what? 1 Kings 17.
Something like that.
It's right around in there.
Well, and we haven't gotten to chapter 7 yet, but with Achan, they have just taken the promised land, and then one person sins,
36 people.
and it messes everything up. Acts. Ananias and Sapphira, beginning of the church, they come in, hey, that's pretty good, we can get some praise, and yeah, we gave it all. Why is that penalty so severe? Because when God is starting something, he wants people to know this is serious. And so there's a lot of parallels.
And fear fell upon all the church.
Hearts melted.
That was after Ananias and Sapphira.
Got their attention.
All right.
Okay, go forth and teach.
So are the demons in hell? I didn't think the demons were in hell yet.
Might be one or two in a special place.
They're in rehab.
You weren't in my class, though, were you?
Nope.
You guys are bad.
Thank you, Bruce.
You know, Revelation talks about this. You can't be changing scripture.
Rehab.
Not even Jesus did that. I can feel it.
Do you think Rahab went into rehab? She changed her profession.
You ever notice how Gentiles
She
or
did have another kid. I mean,
non-followers of God are more faithful to God when they have an encounter with God than God's own people are?
Oh, now you're really getting into it.
Yeah.
We could teach a quarter on that.
It's right at the end of 1 Kings 16 where
I prefer 1 Kings 13 or where
Ahab, let's see,
you remember the prophet that threw in that in Elisha's 2.
Yeah, it's basically just a sentence.
Hiel of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. He laid the foundation at the cost of Abiram, his firstborn, and set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segub,
Yeah.
according to the word of the Lord which he spoke by Joshua the son of Nun.
do you think he like